A new world order, a new global system. We had to be a part of that. And unless we had been in the war, we wouldn't have been entitled to be a part of that. And the American people were too dumb to appreciate that, so they had to be fooled. They had to be tricked. And several thousand of them had to be killed to bring about the greater good of the greater number. You see? The same thing can be said about 9/11. But we will not go there today. We have no idea how much this concept of collectivism is at the core, the rotten core of everything that's happening to us today. Not just in the financial world, but in the political and social world as well. Another element, coercion versus freedom. Boy, you see this every day. Collectivists don't mess around. If they think that something is worth doing, by gosh, there's going to be a law to make you do it, whether you want to or not. They don't mess around. The collectivists will say, for example, everyone ought to wear seat belts. You know, seat belts are good. If you don't wear seat belts, you can get into an accident and you can be injured. So, therefore, let us pass a law and force you to wear seat belts, because otherwise you might not do what is right. You see, if we give you freedom, you will not do what is right that we say is right. So they pass a law. The individualist says, yeah, seatbelts are important. You can be injured without wearing your seatbelts. Everybody ought to wear seatbelts. But instead of forcing you to do so, let us persuade you to do so. If we really believe that you should do so, let's spend some money, do some television advertising, and let's show you by good example, and we should tell you and request you to wear your seatbelts when you're in the car with us and all of this, but we are not going to put you in jail, because individualists believe in freedom of choice, and collectivists believe in coercion. They both want good things, right? There's that argument. They both want the best things for their fellow man, but the collectivists say, by golly, if it's right, you're going to do it or go to prison. And the individualist says, wait a minute, I'd like to have a little freedom, please. All right? And finally, there's equality versus inequality under law. Individualists believe that everybody should be equal under law. Now, it's absurd to say that everybody should be equal. There's no way that could ever happen. It wouldn't be boring if it were. I mean, we're all different. Every person in this room, every person on this planet has strong points and weak points. There's no equality, nor should there be. I could never play basketball. I could never play baseball in school. Nobody wanted me on their team. I couldn't catch a ball. I said, where's the ball? And it hit me in the head. I had no depth perception. So I was not equal when it came to sports. I can't sing. I can't dance. But I can do other things. So we don't want equality across the board, except under law. Under law, everybody should be treated the same. But individualists believe that and support it, but collectivists, they sometimes say it, but they don't believe it. Because if you look at the laws that we have on the books today, all of which were passed by collectivists, there is not one of them I can think of that treats everybody equally. I mean, we've got an income tax that divides things up. It depends how much you make, how old you are, how many people in your family, all these things. Exceptions, exceptions, exceptions. And when you go into a tax attorney's office, he's got a wall of books, all of which are exceptions. It's 87,000 pages of inequality. All of the laws, if you look at them, have exceptions and provisions for this and that treat people differently. Why? Because the collectivist is a social engineer. He looks around the world, he sees injustices. He sees things that he doesn't like, and he says, you know, we've got to change this. We're not going to let freedom work these things out, because that's too slow. We're in a hurry. So they are going to make adjustments in society to compensate for these injustices. And in the process, of course, they create new injustices. And then later on, they have new compensations for the secondary injustices, and that's how the laws keep growing. So, individualists believe that all classes, all groups of people should be treated exactly the same, and nobody should be given any penalties or any restrictions that don't apply equally to everybody else in society. Collectivists believe just the opposite because they think that's how they're going to change society and perfect it, at least perfect it in their eyes. And then finally, I'd like to comment on the proper role of the state. The individualist believes that the proper function of the state is defensive, negative, not positive. The collectivist believes that the state should be the leader of bringing about change and molding society and people. Individualists say the purpose of the state is to protect me and my fellow countrymen, to protect my life, my liberty, and my property. The same thing that I'm entitled to do if I'm struggling for that life rate. We delegate this authority to the government now, or to the state, to do the same thing, but nothing more, because we don't have any more authority than that. The collectivist says, no, no, no. The state is a power unto itself, and it shall make sure that everybody's got an education, everybody's got a proper home to live in, got health care, they've got proper plumbing, you know, whatever they think is a good thing. Whatever they think is good, they will now become the organizer and the director of society using the force of coercion. And I mentioned the other night at the meeting, how many people were here the other night when I spoke at the last meeting? Oh, a lot of you. Well, many of you were not, so I'll take just a moment to talk about what I think is perhaps an error that was made when our Constitution was formed. Now, I am a great advocate of the American Constitution. I believe that it's an inspired document. I think that the men that drafted the Constitution were inspired. So it's just almost a miracle when you think that for the first time in history, in one room, came all of these brilliant scholars. They had read history. They understood the human nature that we were talking about. They were given a chance to become a new monarchy, a new privileged ruling class, because they had just won the American Revolutionary War. And in every other case, the ruling parties had always declared themselves to be, the winning parties had always declared themselves to be the new ruling party, right? The people in the United States expected that now that they had beaten the King of England, the only question on their mind was, well, who is our new king going to be? Because there had never been a situation where they didn't have a king. That's how it was done, right? So we won the war. So now our next job is, who is the king going to be? Our king, new king. And that's how history has always gone. People have always focused on the king, the personality, the bad man. And so they overthrow one regime, and then they replace the bad man with another man. They assume he's going to be a good man. Sure enough, it didn't take very long before they find out that they have a new tyranny on their hands. And they say, oh, well, that's because we got another bad man. It wasn't until the American Revolution came along that they began to look at the system. And our founding fathers recognized that it was the system that was the problem. As long as you had a monarchy, as long as you had one group or a ruling class that could run society, that was concentration of power, that was anathema to freedom. And so they tried to build a system, they did build a system, which would limit the power of the new ruling class, so to speak. It was Jefferson that got a letter, and is published in his selected writings of Thomas Jefferson. There was a very famous letter in there in which he got a communique from a friend of his. He said, Mr. Jefferson, now that we have established this new government, how can we be sure that only good men are elected to office? And Jefferson's response was classic. With a little tinge of irateness, he responded, he said, speak to me not of good men. Rather, let us bind men down with the chains of the Constitution. And there in that one sentence was a brilliant statement of political philosophy that was built right into the Constitution. It was an attempt to bind men down with the chains of the Constitution. Good men, of course they're not going to be good men going into government. Never have been, never will be, never could be. They're all going to be scoundrels. And if you build a system that depends